Hello and welcome to the July 29th edition of the Cluster API Provider AWS Office Hours, a sub-project of Cluster API and SIG Cluster Lifecycle. We have a relatively short agenda today, so if you have any topics you want to cover, please go ahead and add them to the agenda. And I've went ahead and linked that to the chat for the people who are here live. To start off with today, I want to let everybody know that we've had the version 0.3.6 release that's been sent out. Major highlights from that are Cluster API components have been updated to version 0.1.8. There's an optional pprof server for debugging, additional machine and cluster events, and various other bug fixes. And probably the most impactful for people is we started using the image promoter from the K8s Infra working group. So there's a new production image location for the images, and I've linked that in both the release notes and also in the agenda for anybody who wants to take a look at that. The big highlight there is that now the release infrastructure is completely owned by the community. So previously, Cluster API required Justin Santa Barbara from Google to push images. That's using the image promoter now, so that's completely community owned. And previously, the AWS provider required somebody from VMware to be able to push images, and that's no longer the case either. So the whole release pipeline that we have now is fully community owned.
Jason, we're getting more of a vanity URL for the image in the future, right?
Yeah, that's much longer term. So after the image promoter is considered GA, and all of the Kubernetes images have been moved over to use the image promoter instead of, well, right now we're the only guinea pig users of the image promoter. Once all of the existing images have been moved over to use the image promoter, then the k8s.gcr.io vanity domain will be moved over and we'll be able to access our images underneath that. But I haven't heard any timeline on that. So until then, we're using the us.gcr.io/k8sartifacts-prod prefix, and we'll be able to cut over whenever the vanity URL is available. Any other questions on that topic?
Just to clarify, the pre-built AMIs is still coming out of not that process, right?
Yeah, indeed. That is correct. The AMIs are still being built underneath a VMware account. And I don't know when we'd be able to migrate that. In the past, when we've discussed that, there were some concerns about hosting those under a CNCF owned account, specifically around how do we handle vulnerability scanning and remediation and things like that. So because we try to warn people against using those images in production and that people should be building their own images for production use cases, we'll have to figure out as a community how do we go about handling that down the line. Ideally, I would love for that to live underneath a CNCF-owned account, but I don't know if we'll be able to overcome some of the objections upstream about that.
Fair enough. Thanks.
All right. If there are no more questions on that topic, the next topic was around the documentation and unblocking the ability for us to switch over the master branch to serving v1 alpha 2 related documentation. We sorted out the issue with related to how Netlify handles branch names with a dot in them, but for some reason the DNS alias is still not working correctly. It's showing up as not found still. So I'm going to have to try to track down David and see if we can work through the Netlify config to sort that out. But that's the last blocker there. So the DNS is configured correctly, and I have a PR out to update redirects for the release 0.1 branch. But until we solve that DNS or the resolving issue on the Netlify side when using the CNAME record, where we got to hold off on that PR. So hopefully we'll be able to get that sorted out within the next week or so. Does anybody have any other topics before we move on to backlog grooming?
I just had one related to the release with the PPROF PR that I added. And I guess this is more for Seth, since I know you all are running Kappa a lot. Have you run into any memory leaks or apparent memory leaks where the pods just seem to grow unbounded?
No, that doesn't sound like anything we've run across. Do you have a sense of like what kind of conditions might trigger it?
No, we have some internal use of Kappa, and they've been setting the memory limits and requests to, I guess, fairly small, like 1 or 2 or 300 megs, and they keep getting killed. So I don't know if they just legitimately aren't giving it enough memory or if they're doing something that's causing some sort of leak. So that's why I added pprof so that they could try and diagnose it. But I figured since y'all are using it, I'd ask if you'd run into anything.
Yeah, I'll check and follow up, but I'm pretty sure we don't. We've had nothing like that go wrong in our usage.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, let's do some backlog grooming. There's not a ton. We last did issue 891, so we'll start with 899. And I believe, Jason, we're still waiting for more evidence on the ELB deletion or machine deletion thing.
Yes, that's correct. When I went through trying to trace the code to see how we could possibly hit this, I wasn't able to find a way that we would actually trigger that in the delete workflow.
Okay. Maybe we'll circle back with Andrew and see if they've seen it anymore. In terms of other things that are not milestone applied, we've got 3 of them here, although the last one is just a bug. So user story required an HA cluster for whole region. I think we, based on your comments, Jason, and Vince's as well, and Zeth, that like this is basically done, right? Like you can specify your AZs when you're creating machines and you're good to go.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's missing right now is actually documenting the use cases, because I couldn't find an instance where we're documenting how to specify which availability zones you wanted subnets created in, or the fact that you can use the availability zone when defining a machine to point to a particular AZ versus a specified subnet.
All right, so should we repurpose this issue as a documentation issue to handle those couple of things?
I believe so, yes.
All right. All right, so I'm going to say add documentation for how to create a control plane that spans multiple AZs. You think that will cover it? And we can figure out, this is not really a feature, but whatever. Will this work for a title?
I think so.
Okay. And I'm going to just stick this in the 0.4 milestone, although it really needs to be done as part of what's in release 0.3. I don't know if we want to have like a 0.3x milestone that we can just use to put things in that are not really related to V1 Alpha 2 work. That might be something to think about.
Yeah, I like that idea, having a way to track 0.3 related issues, because there's another one that we're going to be coming up on here soon.
Right, let's just do that. Oops. Milestone 0.3.x, and I'm not going to give it a date, mainly because this is just a bucket. So you get to be in 0.3x. All right. Network supports CNI Amazon VPC CNI Kate's support. Jason and Andrew and Nadir have all commented on this. Can one of you summarize what you're thinking about for this one?
Yep, so it seems like a reasonable feature request. The biggest issue is that there's a separate policy that needs to be applied that we don't currently apply for the CNI to work. And Nadir brought up the idea of having a separate policy that could be manually attached to the node role. And we can likely solve it through documentation for now. And then once that's in place, we would still have to give the user instructions on how to deploy, maybe provide a separate add-ons file to use if they want to deploy that. So it's probably likely mostly documentation at this point until we actually have a way to manage add-ons or more particularly CNI providers in Cluster API in general.
Okay. Seth, do you want to take this assignment, since I know Andrew said he would be, or you all would be happy to help out on this?
Yeah, we can definitely contribute docs for what we do. It works fine today to use the CNI with Kappa as long as you bring your own policy. But I'll follow up with Nadir on the ticket, and we'll get it sorted out.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to sign it to you for now. If you want to change that to Andrew or whatever, just let us know.
So I do have one question there, Seth. Are you using the policy that they define in the AWS Amazon VPC CNI Kate's documentation, or do you have a custom policy that scopes it down a bit?
We have a custom policy that mushes the Kappa stuff together with the bits that are important from that with a couple other things. So that would be the documentation that I was referring to, is just putting out that kind of super policy.
Yeah, one of the things that I did when I poked Nadir is I was hoping that he knew of a way to scope down the actual policy that Amazon recommends for using the VPC provider, because it is overly broad right now, where we try to scope things down based on the ownership label within Kubernetes to limit what the roles can interact with. So that might be something that we want to look at as well, but we can easily treat that as a follow-up item as well. It's not something that has to go with the first cut of this documentation.
All right. Anything else on this one, y'all? No. Okay. So let me get this milestone updated. So this one Daniel filed, and basically if you have a control plane that starts up successfully and the control plane ready annotation gets set on the cluster, and then you go delete all your control plane machines, you can't create any more control plane machines because that annotation doesn't let you, or the way the logic is coded, that specific set of conditions keeps you from being able to get any more control plane machines. So Daniel has a suggested fix, and I put help wanted in good first issue, mainly because it seemed appropriate. So I've added this to the 03x milestone. If anybody's interested in taking it, we can certainly go that route. I don't particularly think that this is, from a priority perspective, I would say it's not a P0, given that you can. There is a workaround. I do think it's probably important soon, given that it does require a user to understand how to fix it, and it would be nice if that wasn't required. And I just realized I did not put priorities on the other ones, so let me go back to these two. So the documentation on creating the multi-AZ control plane, what do y'all want, soon or long term?
I think soon makes sense, and if we need to, for some reason, bump it, we can at a later date.
Sounds fair. Imagine we can probably do the same thing on the CNI one, or long term.
Seth, do you have a preference?
Either way, probably long term, since it does work today, and we can work with Snort there to get it going on his cluster.
Okay, sounds good to me. Let me just refresh here. I think everything has, yep, other than the ELB one, and we're going to check back with Andrew to see if we can either close it out or figure out if it was a different set of conditions. So actually, while we are here, I'm just going to put this one on next to indicate that we have looked at it. All right. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Jason, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, if there's nothing else, thank you all, and see you all in 2 weeks.